And well guys, if you're not new to the channel, you know that UserBenchmark does some really interesting stuff. Interesting on the funniest side. Or on the kind of the cringe side, like I do sometimes. I'm cringe as well sometimes. But yeah, they do some interesting stuff, as you can see on this video passing right now on the screen, where I kind of review some of them reviews of the AMD and Intel products, and even Nvidia products in that video, I believe. And in this one, I'm just going to do a way smaller video, but just with some reviews that they've done on the Ryzen 7000 series, 9000 series, the 14th series CPUs, and even, let's say, the new Core Ultra CPUs, and the reviews are fucking funny. But before, let's just lay on to the sponsor. AliExpress, with a Double 11 mega sale offering up to 90% off site-wide from the 8th to the 18th of November. Like the Monsgeek M1 V3, a wireless keyboard with a simple and beautiful design, with the keycaps having different color tones and the letters on the side of the keycaps instead of the top, which I enjoy much more than I thought I would. The possibility of choosing your preferred colors as well, switches and keycaps, and an outstanding sound isolation and noise reduction. I mean, just hear these clicks. And it comes with all the bells and whistles, like tons of accessories, customizable key colors and macros, and the ability to upload your profiles or download other users' ones. And so far, this is my second favorite keyboard in between all the ones that I tested for both gaming and productivity. Use my AM9, 15, 25 or 60 for up to $60 off your purchase, or download the AliExpress app for a chance to win $3,000 shopping credits or $10,000 flight ones. Within minutes of the first pre-release 7000 series user benchmark results, AMD's marketeers broadcast a 20% win over the 12900K via thousands of anonymous Twitter, Reddit, forum and YouTube accounts. Yeah, we usually call those thousands of anonymous accounts users. Buying new AMD products is like buying used cars. It takes time, experience, and a taste for sales hype. It's difficult for consumers to make rational choices while AMD completely dominates sponsored news and social media channels. And I mean, every time that I hear this, it's damn funny. Look at this. AMD products is like buying used cars. I mean, no, it was like this in 2010 or 2011, but as soon as Ryzen released, like in 2017, things completely changed, and we all know that. So stop lying.
Why the fuck you lying?
It's difficult for consumers to make rational choices while AMD completely dominates sponsored news. No, AMD does not completely dominate sponsored news. If someone dominates sponsored news, it's basically Intel. They've been doing that for years. Now, I'm not saying that AMD's marketing is great. I mean, the marketing is far from great, actually. It has been improving step by step, little steps by little steps, but yeah, far from great, but still not sponsored news. Let's be real and let's be honest here. 10 years ago, when AMD was the underdog, this type of marketing was understandable. Yeah, they were the underdog and they were almost on bankruptcy, so they wouldn't be spending money on sponsored news. This is not a review, this is a hate comment.
Oh, I hate you.
But now with a capitalization of 150 billion US dollars, it's, sorry the camera is in front of it, it's disrespectful to AMD's own users. Even with Intel's marketing department asleep at a wheel, true. Now listen to this, Ryzen will quickly end up in the same state as Radeon. Following a series of overhyped releases, consumers have little interest in the Radeon brand. They were firstly doing a CPU review, but now they are shifting to the Radeon brand and saying that the Ryzen brand will be the same as the Radeon brand. And we now see, this was like 2 years or 3 years ago when the 7950X was released, like 2 years ago, I believe. And yeah, Ryzen just keeps getting better and better while Intel is sinking down. So this aged like fine milk. But yeah, not fine wine, fine milk.
I'm tired, boss.
The combined market share of all AMD's GPUs, discrete Radeon RX 5000 and 6000 GPUs, Steam stats, is just 2%. And even by that date, when I was doing this review, this is just bluntly false. AMD never had only 2% of the market in terms of discrete GPUs. Never. They never went that low. So this is just a full fat Lie.
Why the fuck you lying?
Although the new 7000 series Zen 4 CPUs are actually around 15% faster than their predecessors, they have a hefty cooling requirements, TDP plus 60% versus 5000 series. They are definitely harder to cool up, but they are also designed and meant to be running at higher temperatures. I do not advise running them at really high temperatures, so like 75, 85 degrees tops when doing some multi-threading workloads, or maybe you can go up to the limit, which is 95, which the CPU, the 7000 series, will go up to that limit automatically because it doesn't matter. As soon as they reach the 95 degrees, they will decrease voltage and frequency in order to not fry your chip, so you're completely fine. It is done that way by design, so there's not anything to worry about. Still, I do not advise people doing that, so if you can get your temperatures lower, do it. You can go to 95 degrees, let's say 1 to 10 minutes tops, but don't push it too much, in my opinion, although according to AMD, once again, it doesn't make nothing to the CPU, it just won't fry your CPU. But anyway, TDP and power consumption are different things as well too. 30 seconds BIOS post times, wrong. Once again, you just have to enable the memory context restore in order to not have these boot times. Expensive DDR5 RAM requirements, once again, this is old and only work with expensive motherboards. This is still true though. The motherboards are expensive. Even nowadays, unless you're getting a older generation motherboard, they are expensive. So yeah. Despite the 7000 series struggling to match Intel's outgoing 12th gen, which is once again false anyway, AMD marketed it as a future-proof platform, which is true. I mean, look at AM4. AM4 survived 4 years, and now that we are in 2024, in the end of 2024, we have AM5 with Zen 4 and Zen 5, and we have Zen 4, Zen 4X3D, Zen 5, Zen 5X3D, and Zen 6 will also be released on AM5. So yeah, shut up CPU Pro. They want users to pay a premium for the last generation performance in exchange for the shallow promise of upgrades in the future, which is not shallow because it is a promise well kept, and yeah, they aren't paying for last generation performance. I mean, 12900K and 13900K performance is basically the same. This is for the 7000 series, but we also have the one for the 7600X3D, and the one from the 7600X3D is way more recent. But before that, sorry, let's go into the 7800X3D. That was the golden standard for several time in terms of gaming performance until the 9800X3D released, which we will see as well, but 7800X3D. The AMD 7000X3D CPUs have the same core architecture as the rest of the 7000 series, but they have one group of 8 3D cores with extra cache. Yeah, they aren't 3D cores, they are actually just cores, but they have more cache. The 3D cores are priced higher, but run at 10% lower clocks. In terms of gaming repetitive tasks, the cache is much better than having 10% higher clocks, but yeah. For most real-world tasks, performance is comparable to the 7000X variant. Now, what do you call real-world tasks? Because gaming is actually a pretty real-world task nowadays, and in terms of that scenario, the performance of the X3D chips is much better. And in terms of multi-threading and so on, I mean, a real-world scenario, day-to-day scenario for the common user is not rendering, nor compressing or decompressing. I mean, it's just, yeah, gaming and using the computer to go to work, the internet, and so on. So yeah, I would say that gaming is a much real-life scenario than the real-life scenarios or real-world tasks that you're talking about. Cache-sensitive scenarios such as low-resolution canned game benchmarks with an RTX 4090 $2,000, benefit at cost of everything else. If you are CPU bottlenecked, you can be testing at 360p, 480p, 720p, 1080p, 1440p, 4K, 8K, 16K, 2000 million K. As long as your CPU bottleneck, the CPU will deliver almost the same FPS at all resolutions, being the higher resolution slightly different, with slightly lower FPS, just because of the memory bandwidth. But that's about it. That's just that. Be wary of sponsored reviews with cherry-picked games that shows the wins, ignore the frame drops, and gloss over the losses. What frame drops? The X3D CPUs actually have way less frame drops than the other ones because they also have higher averages and higher 1% lows. They are much more stable because they have more cache. Once again, the CPU and the memory don't have to do as much trade-offs because they do have more cache, so more information is stored on the cache, leading to higher performance because the cache is much faster than the normal DDR5 RAM. So that's it. Also watch out for AMD's army of Neanderthal social media accounts on Reddit, forums, and YouTube. They will be singing their own praises as usual, calling AMD's armies of Neanderthal media accounts. This is just bad. AMD should sue them. They deserve it. This is not just one review. This is just pure hate. But anyway, AMD continued to develop advanced marketing relationships with select YouTubers with the obvious aim of compensating for second-tier products with their first-tier marketing. I mean, this is actually the opposite. AMD does have bad marketing, or at least not optimal marketing, but they do have good products. I mean, the 7800X 3D was wiping the floor with a 14, even with the 4900K. Well, I mean, wiping the floor is not the correct term, but it was winning generally from the 4900K in terms of gaming, while consuming less power, having higher 1% lows, and was just losing obviously in the multi-threading benchmark. That's obvious because it has less cores and threads. But in terms of gaming, it was literally winning from the 4900K. So this makes no sense at all. No sense. But let's go to the 7600X 3D that was released like a couple of months ago. It's basically a 7600X with 3D cache as well. The 4.1 GHz base clock on the 7600X 3D is notably low, okay? Particularly when compared to the 4.7 GHz base clock on the 7600X and 4.4 GHz on the 7800X 3D. I mean, the 7600X 3D is aimed at gaming performance, so it has way more cache and lower clock, so it doesn't really matter because it still has way more cache, which makes the 7600X 3D perform much better than the 7600X. I actually have the CPU right here ready to be tested, and I'll be testing the 5700X 3D, 7600X, and 7600X 3D. But yeah, so far he is right, but he's talking like it is a bad thing, and it isn't properly a bad thing, especially in this scenario. At $300 US, the 7600X 3D offers very poor value for money. Yes and no, it depends on your country, but at $300 right now, it doesn't really offer that poor value per money, that poor performance for the money, because again, in terms of gaming performance, it is actually performing very well, but you'll see that soon, and you can see that with the videos across the internet. Into this market, there are several cheaper and faster alternatives available, including the 12600KF at $135. Now, at $135, the 12600KF is definitely a very good choice, definitely a very good choice. But if you're going to buy a 12600K, you are actually going to buy a dead platform, because Intel already moved on, while AM5 is still a platform that will get you the 9000 series, 9000 series X3D CPUs, and the Zen 6 series that will come out. And again, saying that the 12600K is faster, several cheaper and faster alternatives than the 7600X 3D is once again just lying. The 7600X 3D is much, and I repeat, much faster than the 12600KF. Much faster. And
I know.
the Ryzen 9000 series CPUs have the same integrated graphics, PCIe lanes, USB support, and DRAM controller as the 7000 series. The only difference is improved cores, which have moved from TSMC's 5nm to 4nm. The new cores offer 15% more performance, again under cherry-picked conditions, but for latency-sensitive workloads like gaming, they are just few percent faster. And this is true and false, because in terms of latency sensitive workloads, they are actually considerably faster, especially if we're talking about professional workloads. They are considerably faster in those scenarios, and they are faster sometimes in terms of multi-threading. Not in all CPUs, not in the on the 9700X. Once again, not in all CPUs, but they are definitely faster. In terms of AI, they are also faster. But in terms of gaming performance, yes, I myself found around a 10% difference from 5 to 10% difference from the previous generation. For example, the 9900X is kind of faster than the 7900X, considerably faster in some scenarios, while the 9700X is just a few percent faster, like from 5 to 10% faster than the 7700X. So it kind of depends on the CPU. The Ryzen 9 CPUs have a bigger difference compared to the Ryzen 7 ones. And since the 7000 series CPUs flopped, which is actually false, there are several 7000 series CPUs around, several of them, 7800X 3D, somewhat excluded, not somewhat. It is excluded because you just can't lie that it is the best processor for gaming apart from the 9800X 3D. So yeah, you just can't lie. More than you usually do. Due to unrealistic pricing, slow boot times once again is hitting the same nail. And this is this is not real. Slow boot times, high platform costs, and Windows Game Bar requirements is picking on such a stupid thing. Windows Game Bar requirements. This is just for the Ryzen 9 series that have 3D cache. This is just for those CPUs like the 7900X 3D, and when this one comes out, the 9900X 3D, if it doesn't have 3D cache on both CCDs. That's just for it, and even with the new chipset drivers, I believe, at least according to AMD, you don't really need Windows Game Bar anymore. But anyway, the 9000 series is more or less DOA, which was kind of true in that scenario. When the 9000X 3D variants launch, expected early 2025, well, it was earlier than that, gamers who play cache-sensitive games such as Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Factorio with a 4090 and don't mind frame drops may find value in the 9800X 3D. Now, this is just so much hate. I mean, even today, Hardware Unboxed released another video testing the 9800X 3D and even the 7700X, which is considerably slower, at 1080p and then using 4K with balanced upscaling just to show the differences for some people that say that cherry picking and so on. Yeah, more and more the game engines are using cache because there are more cache on the CPUs, and more the 3D cache CPUs are getting better. So this is just blatantly false, and again, these guys should be sued. So yeah, this is basically it. If this guy doesn't really have mental issues, I hope not. Yeah, it has at least some problems. So we all know by now that User Benchmark in terms of reviews is entirely Intel biased. So now let's go and see the Core Ultra 9 285K, which is actually one of the CPUs that perform worse than the 4900K, that performs worse than the 9800X 3D, and worse than the 7800X 3D in most scenarios. So let's see what they have to say about these CPUs that actually perform worse than Intel's previous generation. These early benchmarks, which were probably leaked by marketeers, once again, marketers or marketeers, whatever, marketers I guess, indicate the best case scenario for Intel's new Arrow Lake desktop processors. I'm actually impressed to see the guy saying this. The new chiplet-based design results in around 90 nanoseconds of memory latency compared to around 60 nanoseconds on the Intel's 12th, 13th and 14th generations. Also true, they are kind of shifting things in order to be able to compete in the future. Consequently, gaming performance on the 200 series is susceptible to frame drops. And I suspect that by now the CPU Pro doesn't actually hate AMD, it just wants like monolithic dies forever. Because as soon as Intel changed to the MCM design, they are already hating and saying that the latency is too high and so on. Now he's shifting once again to AMD. It is really interesting because as soon as he talks something about Intel, he shifts immediately to AMD. AMD's 7800X 3D and 9800X 3D CPUs, priced at over $400, are widely marketed as the best gaming CPUs in the world. Because it's true, they are the best gaming CPUs in the world. Facts don't care about your feelings. Meanwhile, Intel 13600K and 14600K continue to offer almost unparalleled real-world gaming performance for around $200. Where? I really want to see where you can find one of these, at least the 14600K at $200, because you can't. Or at least I believe that you can't. But yeah, for $200, great performance, definitely great performance. Now, let's not imply that they are faster than these CPUs, because they are not even close. Spending more money on a gaming CPU is normally a waste of money, as games are rarely CPU bound under real world conditions. And again, it is not about the game being CPU bound or GPU bound. Of course, there are games that are more CPU bound than GPU bound, like City Skylines, like City Builders and so on, like Space Galactic Wars like Homeworld 3 and some others. But usually, even on GPU, on the GPU tight situations, as soon as you go to high enough frame rates, the CPU will be the bottleneck. If you're playing Counter-Strike 2, if you're playing Valorant, so on, even if you're playing at higher resolution with a lower end GPU, yes, you're most likely gonna get CPU bottleneck. It's about the FPS output in most scenarios, and this guy is just crazy. But again, I also have to say that usually it is better for you, unless you have a really unbalanced build, it is usually better to get a better GPU first and then a better CPU than the opposite. So if you have a mid-tier GPU, don't go to a high-tier CPU and then the GPU. Do the opposite. Firstly, upgrade the GPU and then the CPU. That's usually a better option if you have a balanced build. Now to finish, without significant improvements in social media marketing, forums, Reddit, YouTube and so on. Again, this guy keeps talking about the marketing and so on. AMD is not good at marketing. Intel now faces a very real risk of bankruptcy, third worst performing S&P 500 stock from January to August 2024. Firstly, they say that these CPUs are bad, then they say that the last generation is much better, and then they say that Intel is at risk of bankruptcy. I sense that this guy doesn't really hate AMD processors, he just hates multi-chip module design CPUs or GPUs, whatever. He just wants monolithic dies, because as soon as Intel goes to a non-monolithic die, it keeps babbling about latency and so on and so on and so on. I mean, yeah, it must hurt having this guy's life. I mean, October 2024. Jesus. And by the way, I knew that I saw some reviews of the 14 series before, and I can't find any review. 14900K, 14700K, 14600K, 14500, 14400F. Nothing of a review so close to that. User benchmark is one of those things that makes no sense, and people should not look at it. The results aren't usually that real. I mean, if you look at the best user rate CPUs, and if you look at the best performance CPU overall, the 4900K is still number one somehow, while the other CPUs from AMD do much better overall in several scenarios. So people have much better options going to other websites, other reviewers like Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unbox, Daniel O, and even Vex does some really interesting benchmarks. And there are more people like Hardware Canucks, or even my channel. You can go to my channel. I have GPU benchmarks, GPU tutorials, CPU benchmarks, CPU tutorials as well. I have many information that you can use there. So go to my video section, because you can learn a lot, and sometimes I even learn. I learn every day. You don't know everything. Sometimes you might be wrong, and sometimes you might be corrected, and sometimes you might need to say sorry, I was wrong, and I will kind of learn and improve myself. That's what everyone should look into. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video, guys. Leave a comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about their reviews. And if you just want to go to sorry, if you want to go to other reviews and watch the things that they have here, go. But I mean, you're giving them money and attention, so my opinion is don't do it. They don't really deserve it. Thank you once again, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.